I started 2020 thinking that this year was going to be my year. I got my business off the ground, I was feeling really confident that we would get pregnant this year, and I was planning on celebrating my 30th birthday with a bang. Instead, I'm going to tell you why it was the worst birthday of my life so far. On the evening of Friday, May 22nd, I saw my very first positive pregnancy test. And only 5 days later, I found out it was ending. I had really hoped that our journey wouldn't come to a place where I would need to make this video, but unfortunately, miscarriage is a very common occurrence. Approximately 1 in 5 pregnancies end in miscarriage, and most of them are situations like mine where they happen very, very early, and most women don't even know they're pregnant yet by that point. But I wanted to make this video because miscarriage, along with infertility, is one of those topics that people just don't talk about. It's this taboo thing that people feel like they can't talk about and that they need to hide and keep to themselves because it makes people uncomfortable. But it's one of those life experiences where so many women go through it feeling so alone, not realizing how common it is and how many other people are going through the exact same thing or have been through the exact same thing. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about my miscarriage experience. I want to talk about the 4.5 blissful, happy days that I had. I'm going to talk about going through the process of finding out that you're experiencing a loss, going through the grief of that situation, and then coming out of it on the other side with a more positive outlook. So I just turned 30 on June 2nd. And originally, my plan for my life was to be finished having kids by the time I was 30. Obviously, things didn't go that way, so I kind of had to rework that plan. And my new goal was to at least get pregnant before I was 30. So when I saw that positive pregnancy test on May 22nd, a little less than 2 weeks before my 30th birthday, I was like, wow. I went and did it right at the last second. So going back to the beginning, I had my failed IVF at the end of March. And oftentimes it can take a couple months for your cycles to get back to normal following a failed IVF cycle. So my first cycle following the failed IVF was 47 days long, which was pretty long considering that my normal cycle length is about 30 days. But then my second cycle around day 14, and I'm going to preface this by saying I might get a little bit TMI, but on day 14 of my second cycle, I started getting a little bit crampy on my left side, and I also had the barest amount of spotting, like the least amount of spotting I've ever had in my life. And I thought, oh, that's weird. Maybe I'm ovulating at a normal time this cycle all of a sudden, because normally I ovulate quite late in my cycle, around like day 19 or 20. And I also don't normally experience ovulation symptoms like spotting or pain. But then pretty much 2 days after that, I started bleeding enough that I thought it was my period. And I bled like that for about 3 to 4 days, and then it stopped, which was short for me for a regular period, but it was still enough bleeding that I thought it was my period and nothing else. I didn't think anything else of it. So I thought, okay, maybe I just had a really short cycle. That cycle was 15 days, and my body in the past has done this thing where if I had a really long cycle, then sometimes my next cycle is short and it kind of compensates for the long one. Because if you add 47 days and 15 days together and kind of get the average of that, it's around the same number as my regular average period length. So that was kind of my thought process there. The day after my period ended, I woke up and my boobs felt kind of full. And this is important because this only happens to me right before my period starts. And I thought my period had just ended, so it didn't make any sense to me why this symptom was happening to me at that time. My immediate thought wasn't like, oh, I wonder if I'm pregnant, but I did decide to take a pregnancy test just for fun because I honestly haven't taken one in a while. And I truly didn't think that it would be positive. I'm so used to seeing negatives over and over and over again, to the point where I didn't even have my camera on me when I initially took the test. I didn't dip it in a cup like I normally do because if I ever did get a positive, then I would want to probably test again immediately. So I didn't do that. And this time I was like, I'm kind of curious to see how long it takes the dye to move across the test, so I just want to kind of watch it this time. You know, all these things. So I'm watching the dye move across the test, and pretty much as soon as it gets to where the second line is supposed to be, it immediately appears. And by the time it was done, like the 5-minute limit, there was no doubt about it. Like it wasn't even a squinter, because on all the Facebook groups I'm on, a lot of people that take pregnancy tests pretty early after ovulation, if they do get a positive, it's often very faint, so much so that you have to like hold it up to the light in a certain way or invert a picture of it in order to see any shadow of a line. But mine, like I could hold it from way over here and could see the 2 lines. So I was definitely in shock. I didn't believe what I was seeing. I didn't think it was real. I was too scared to believe it. I didn't want to get my hopes up because I had gotten my hopes up so many times throughout this whole process, and it's just too devastating when things don't work out how you think they are going to. And I debated back and forth as to whether to tell Peter right away or whether to get my blood work done first just to have it confirmed, because Peter has always said that he probably wouldn't believe it until a doctor tells him it's true. And I was kind of the same way at that point, but I couldn't hold it in any longer, so I ended up giving him this little gift box that had a onesie in it. I had my friend Claudia custom make it a long time ago, saying made with love and a little bit of science. And then I taped the little pregnancy test stick into a little card that I made saying, well, I guess we were both surprised. Because honestly, like, throughout this whole process, I never thought that we would get pregnant by accident or naturally, or that it would be any kind of surprise to us. But it was all 3 of those things, and I don't know how it happened. It's like IVF gave me some kind of a kickstart to my system, or maybe it's just a complete coincidence and that was just the month that I had a great egg and things just worked out or got farther than they had in the past. So I told him, we were both skeptical. I was getting to the point where I was starting to get really excited, and it was like the floodgates in my brain just opened up and started spilling out all over the goddamn place. Because all of the things that I haven't let myself think about for the past 2 years just all came flooding in. It was like seeing those 2 lines gave me permission to start thinking about all this stuff again, and I couldn't control it because the logical side of me said, you know, like, whoa, slow down, like, rein it in. We can't get too excited yet, like, we haven't even confirmed it with a blood test, or like, we don't know if everything's gonna be okay. And with our luck, it wasn't going to be okay. But regardless, I started thinking about all the things. I started thinking about nursery ideas. I downloaded a baby name app again. I downloaded the Ovia pregnancy app. I started going back to my old Pinterest boards that I haven't looked at in ages. Started thinking about what it would be like to be pregnant during this time in the pandemic, and how, you know, appointments would work if Peter could come with me. Just thinking about all these things, suddenly having deadlines for my home daycare, and it was honestly kind of overwhelming. I was also thinking about all the different ways that I would need to tell people now, because I have had like a Word document of ideas of all the ways that I would tell different pieces of my family or different friends, and a lot of those I couldn't do anymore because of the pandemic. So I was thinking of new ways to tell people, which was disappointing, but it was also exciting to actually be planning these things and to feel like they were actually going to happen, that it was actually real. Unfortunately, I did get my positive pregnancy test on a Friday evening, so I had to wait until Monday to go into my clinic to get a blood test. That first blood test came back at 57, which, if we were basing it off of my last real period, which was May 1st, then that was pretty much right on track with where I should have been at 3 weeks. So that was good news. But they did, you know, warn me that you really only find out if it's good news at the follow-up blood test, when they check to see if your levels are doubling like they should be every 48 hours. And the other fun thing about this was that this cycle that I got pregnant started on May 1st, and May 1st was exactly 2 years to the day that we started trying, because we started trying on mine and Peter's dating anniversary. So it just kind of made it a little bit extra special in that way, I guess. Before even getting my first blood test over the weekend, I was debating whether or not to tell my best friends and my mom. I very quickly went from deciding I would tell my friends after I got my first blood test and everything was confirmed and like relatively good news, to maybe I'll tell them on Sunday, to Saturday going to the dollar store to get a poster board to make a poster, which I spent a couple hours painting, telling them that day, like basically begging Peter for us to just go on a drive and tell all of my best friends. And it was kind of a weird feeling because I felt like I was lying to them. I had a lot of anxiety about telling them. Like, I wanted to tell them because I wanted to share it with them and talk to them about it. I hate keeping happy secrets or any secrets in general, which is why I think keeping the secret of infertility had such a negative toll on my mental health. I was so shaky from a combination of excitement and anxiety because I didn't want to have to break their hearts if it didn't work out. I was not as was scared about that with my friends, but I was really scared about that part with my mom because, you know, like me, she's very sensitive and I didn't want to get her hopes up, which I understand is why a lot of people don't announce things like that until they're 12 weeks. My feelings about that are a little bit different for the reasons that I'm making this series, and it's that despite how difficult it might be to have to tell so many more people that you've lost a pregnancy, I still feel like it's worth celebrating. And I don't want to hide those moments of happiness. I want to share them with the world and I want to experience it with others. And if it does end in a loss, which it did, then there's that many more people that are there to support you through the hard time. You know, I won't need to put on a fake smile with people when I'm going through something because it's just exhausting and it takes a toll. I didn't want to miss the opportunity of celebrating it and, you know, taking advantage of the happiness that I was experiencing, even if it may have been short-lived. So on Saturday, I told my best friends Claudia, Tyler, Rebecca, and Whitney. And then Monday, when my mom and Phil were home, I told her and my stepdad. And I was planning on telling my dad and my stepmom and my sister on the Wednesday after I had gotten good news. I had planned to go over there. I was gonna tell my sister separately. We were gonna go on a little walk and do a photo shoot with her, and I was gonna tell her that way. But on Wednesday the 27th, I went in the morning for my blood work and I got a call telling me that my HCG levels had dropped down to 29. Which was not a good sign. I was devastated. Normally, I am very good at preparing myself for the worst possible outcomes. I found that optimism doesn't work so well for me because I have a really hard time recovering from that, rather than just going into it expecting the worst, and then if things are better than the worst, then that's great. But at least if it's the worst outcome, then I'm more emotionally prepared to deal with it. But I wasn't this time. I guess I didn't expect things to go badly so soon. Like, I guess if they were to not work out, I expected to have a little bit more time, but I didn't. And so it had dropped by basically half, and I spent the rest of that day Googling everything, just trying to find some source of hope or someone's story where their HCG dropped and it ended up being okay, but I couldn't find anything. And all my friends, you know, were still very hopeful, but I knew it was done. My nurses basically said to stop taking the progesterone, which I had actually only taken for the one day, and to come in the following Wednesday to check that my levels have gone back down to 0. That's probably the most devastated I've been throughout this entire process. I can't remember if I mentioned in past videos about how prior to this I had never seen a positive pregnancy test, and I felt kind of guilty for having these thoughts in the past because it was like if you had to choose a situation, would you rather just never get a positive test or keep miscarrying? And I didn't really know the answer to that question, but I guess part of me felt like at least if I was having a miscarriage, at least the positive in that situation is knowing that I can get pregnant, and it's almost getting past that first stage of like, at least things are fertilizing, like at least some of my eggs are still okay to a point. But going through it now, I feel like my opinion on that has changed a little bit, because in those 4.5 days my entire life changed. I saw a whole future with this potential child that was inside me. Whereas at least before I was a bit protected from that because, you know, my defense mechanisms are up. I didn't let myself think about that. I have a very specific video planned out for when I would announce a pregnancy, and I was planning on putting out that video on Father's Day. What kind of cruel fate let this happen just right after Mother's Day, and then also that I was literally miscarrying on my birthday. And I think part of the reason that I was feeling kind of confident about it because I was having very strong symptoms, like right off the bat. Starting the day that I found out, I started feeling nauseous, like not enough to be throwing up or anything, but just continually nauseous. A combination of that and then feeling just hungry all the time, no matter how much I ate over those past 5 days. I was insatiable, like I was just so hungry. I started waking up like super early in the morning. I'd be waking up on my own like at 6 o'clock, like before my 7 o'clock alarm even goes off. I was peeing all the time, like just so many things. I guess I was hopeful that if I'm having such strong symptoms, and especially because I had such a strong line on that first test, I thought maybe, you know, like this is a good one. Maybe this is gonna be okay. Because that first pregnancy test, I wasn't tracking, but if I based it off of when I thought I was ovulating and my app that I use, I was only 9 days after ovulation, which is pretty early to get a test that was that strong. It was like kind of excruciating waiting for the bleeding to start because there was still part of me that was just hoping that maybe the blood test was wrong, or like maybe it was going to be okay somehow. So when the bleeding started, I actually thought that I was going to have a lot harder time with that, but by that point I had just distanced myself from the world just so I could grieve and go through, you know, the motions of what I was feeling, because I've learned that I need to just take time for myself, not even talk to my best friends, just like tell them like this is what's going on and I just need space. And then so I took like 3 days. And on the third day, Peter and I really spent a lot of time together, and that seemed to really help, like just get it all out, you know, let myself cry. So by the time the bleeding started, I was in a much better place. It was actually only on day 30 of my cycle, which is weird because if I hadn't taken that pregnancy test just on a whim, I may have never even known. The cramps were unreal, and it was definitely way heavier than my normal periods. All of that being said, I do want to share some snippets of the videos that I took of the announcements that I did make to my friends and some of my family, because it just honestly makes me really sad to think about those wonderful videos that I honestly really love. Just to think about them sitting in a folder for the rest of time is just kind of depressing to think about. So I still want to celebrate the 5 or 4.5 happy days that I had and share these moments with everyone, because like I said, in those 4.5 days my entire world changed, and that's the hope that I'm trying to hold on to. And I'm going to make a second part to this video, just because this one's getting a bit long, to address certain questions that I'm sure will come up, such as if I wonder if it was my fault or not. Did I regret telling people so soon? A little bit more about the grieving process, how Peter is dealing with it, how I'm feeling about it all now, and our plans moving forward. Thank you so much for watching. And once again, thank you to everyone who has offered their love and support. We really appreciate it. Bye.